Hi and welcome to my channel. I love a film SLR camera with an aperture priority metering choice. And one of my favourite cameras is my Nikon F4, which has just that and a bunch of other modes too. But I'm going to take a dive right back to the beginning of auto SLRs to bring you two that are really great buys today if you find a good one. So let's get into it. (1971 and 72 were pretty auspicious years. They were the years in which auto exposure came to SLR photography. This was a big deal. Even though serious amateurs and professionals were fairly slow to take up on auto exposure, when they did, it was the start of a roller coaster ride to modes and autofocus and all the amazing automation our modern cameras include. First was the Pentax ES, or should I say first was the Electrospotmatic, limited to the Japanese market only in 1971 because of its early reliability issues. It was then hastily rejigged and released later in 1971 worldwide as the Pentax ES. Who were they kidding? ES? Electrospotmatic? Yeah. Meanwhile, the folks over at Nikon were beavering away to introduce an auto camera of their own, and in 1972 this was launched as the Nikkormat EL. On paper, these cameras are superficially similar in spec. It's the overall design aesthetic that really differs. Firstly, they are both manual and aperture priority film SLRs with 1 second to 1,000th shutter speeds. Both feature open aperture metering with the right lenses. Both have solid all-metal construction and both give access to a wide range of super high quality lenses. Let's tackle the design thing first. The ES is essentially identical in body styling to the rest of the Spotmatic range, albeit with a slightly thicker base plate to accommodate all the electronics. There's something essentially swinging 60s about the Pentax look. Stylish, a bit minimalist, something to be seen with like Ringo Starr did in the film Hard Day's Night. There are sweeping lines to the wind-on lever with its cute cocked tip, and the curved swages in the metal around the pentaprism exude style, especially in black like my version of the ES. The Nikkormat EL could kindly be described as statuesque rather than pretty. It's a big brute of a camera with a 70s aesthetic that's more proto-heavy metal than pop art. It has a rugged, mechanical purposefulness like a Tiger tank. Prior to the Nikkormat line that started with the FT, as far as SLRs were concerned, Nippon Kogaku had only made the fully professional Nikon F and its large lens range. And early on, they pretty much realised they wanted a bit of that sweet amateur market action. They had tried contracting out to Mamiya to make the ill-fated Nikkorex, a camera with a name that sounded like a painkiller or a cure for marital dysfunction, and that ultimately had the popularity of a fart in a diving bell. It just wasn't made that well. So they took what was still very much a professional Nikon, did away with the interchangeable prism, gave it a hinged film door instead of the removable base plate the F had, which was inherited from Nikon's early Contax copy rangefinders. Actually, this was a huge step forward. They also gave it essentially the same metering system as the Nikon F. Nippon Kogaku didn't really know how to make an amateur camera, and so with the Nikkormat pretty much invented the prosumer camera. Loads of professionals, including a young me, had one in their bag as either a backup to an F or an F2, or even as their main squeeze in its own right. Interestingly, Pentax never really had the success in the professional camp that Nikon enjoyed. Sure, there were some pros like Sebastian Salgado and David Bailey who were known to use them, but in the press pack, Nikon and Canon held the alpha status. Why Pentax, who outsold Canon and Nikon put together for a period, were always the bridesmaid and never the blushing bride, might be down to their refusal till very late in the game, and late in the 70s, to adopt a bayonet lens mount. And testing these cameras side by side, the extra time to get an M42 screw mount lens mounted, especially in gloves or in cold weather or in the rain, would have been telling for an on-the-go professional. Sure, you have the Nikon shuffle, setting the body and lens to f5.6, engaging the AI fork and giving a turn to the right and left to index the maximum aperture to the camera's meter, but that was the same on the Nikon F with a meter prism and a quick instinctive manoeuvre once you'd done it a few times. By the time Pentax had sorted out a bayonet lens mount, a decent motor drive system, and interchangeable finders, like other professional SLRs, the professional boat had long since sailed. The little Pentax ES actually scores some brownie points over the Nikon, in that it has not one but two shutter mechanisms. A fully mechanical one that handles the speeds from a 60th to a 1000th and will carry on doing so even with no battery, and an electronic one that gives stepless speeds from a full 8 seconds to the top speed of a 1000th of a second. The EL's slowest electronic speed is actually 4 seconds. The Nikon is all electronic, but with just an emergency 90th of a second if you run out of battery. Both of these cameras can be made to perform stop-down auto exposure, which was a neat trick, albeit arguably a bit more easily on the Pentax because of the stop-down lever placement. So down to results. While cameras don't make images, lenses do, and with both Pentax and Nikon of the era, you have access to some pretty epic glass. Pentax lenses have buttery smooth focusing, and the 50mm 1.8 is one of the sharpest, best contrast standard lenses I've ever shot. Whereas the 50mm f2 Nikkor has colours to die for, as well as being breathtakingly sharp. You can't really go wrong with Nikon or Pentax glass, but remember, there are very few post-1976 Nikon bodies that can mount pre-AI lenses safely, as you can't retract the AI tab on many of the later cameras that indexes later lenses. However, all Nikon glass with aperture rings will mount to a Nikkormat EL, but only in stop-down mode for metering. You do have the widest range of third-party lenses in Pentax screw mount, including the insanely good Carl Zeiss ones, like the 50mm Pancola. I'd argue, however, that there are almost too many cheap and cheerful screw mount third-party lenses that offer mediocre performance. It's a confusing market. If you buy Pentax Takumar own-branded lenses, they're pretty much bargains these days, so that's the way I would tend to stick. In contrast, the pre-AI third-party lens pool out there, on the second-hand market, well, that's all you can get nowadays, is smaller. Also, many Nikon lenses are a bit pricier simply because of the fact they're Nikon. However, there are still great bargains to be had, and usually for a lot less money than later AI lenses. In handling, these two old girls are quite similar. The Nikkormat is significantly heavier, but like the Pentax, it has a lovely shutter sound, a smooth wind-on, and pretty instinctive handling. The Nikon's viewfinder appears significantly brighter and larger, and that's saying something, as the Pentax Spotmatic range were known for bright finders. Both have shutter speed readouts in the finder, but neither are illuminated, so if the light is low on aperture priority, you have little idea of what shutter speed the camera is setting. In manual mode, metering very low light is barely a thing with either camera. You can't see to match the needles, so carry a separate light meter or guess. My verdict, which one do I think takes the early auto SLR crown? That's a tough one. Both are very capable cameras that will get you good results if you find a good one that's working well. The Nikon is reputedly more difficult to work on if there's an issue, but both are over 50 years old these days, and the likelihood is that natural selection will have filtered out the ones most likely to die on you in 5 minutes. The Pentax still has mechanical speeds in a range wide enough to get you by if your battery's drained, but the Nikkormat has a bright and easy to locate battery test button, so that's possibly less likely to happen. I'm lucky enough to have them both, and to have bought them for a very little money. The Pentax is a sort of small, handy camera that I'd sling in a backpack and carry anywhere, anytime. It's still wonderfully stylish. It's solid and fairly weighty, but small and neat. The Spotmatic family were quite hip when they came out, and even if they settled into being the staples of camera club pipe smokers as the years went on, they're still hip today, as well as being extremely capable. The Nikkormat EL, like its FT and FTN, FT2 and FT3 brothers, were never supermodels looks-wise. They have a sort of brutal, purposeful machine aesthetic, with all exterior AI linkages and angular corners that hark to Nikon F Photomics and Nikon F2 models. In a way, they scream 70s design, mixed with a professional toughness that while the Pentax is undeniably tough, it doesn't look like a cage fighter. I probably wouldn't elect to throw a Nikkormat, either EL or any of its brothers, into my backpack for a hike if ounces mattered. But there's not really that much in it with the Pentax, except Pentax lenses are usually a bit smaller. As pretty much a lifelong Nikon shooter, the Nikkormat has a familiarity of feel that I love, and for that alone, and its bigger viewfinder, I'd probably give it the winning point. That being said, in the few weeks I've owned the Pentax ES, it's made a huge impression on me and my film stocks. Its meter is very accurate indeed. It's tough whilst being unobtrusive enough to use as a street shooter or to take to a hip party and show off as industrial age jewellery whilst taking some great pictures in the process. To sum up, if you get a good one, you can't go wrong with either of these old girls. Well, I hope you enjoyed my clash of the early auto titans. They're both cameras I really enjoy shooting with, and I'm going to be bringing you a video with the results from both of them very, very shortly, when we've got slightly better and less grey weather out there in the UK winter. If you've enjoyed this content, perhaps you'll hit the like button. It puts a great big smile on my face, as do all your comments. I love them coming in. Also, perhaps you'll think about subscribing. We're now over the 3,000 subscribers, and I'm feeling really good about that. You can always take a look for free at the moment on what I have on my Patreon channel, and there's a link for that in the description, and all kinds of things that aren't on here and more to come. And if you feel like contributing a little bit more, maybe buy me a film or buy me a coffee, there's a link for that as well. Anyway, until I see you again, take care. Keep taking pictures.